Sitting alone at the wedding, the Omega looked up as the Lycan King said, "Stay with me." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Elena Carter sat alone at the far edge of the wedding hall, close enough to hear the soft swell of music, but far enough to feel as though it was never meant for her. The room glowed with warm candlelight and polished wood, the kind of space designed to celebrate belonging. Yet the empty chair beside her felt louder than the vows being whispered at the altar. Around her, guests leaned together, smiling, murmuring, adjusting silk sleeves and borrowed confidence, while Elena kept her hands folded in her lap, steady, composed, careful not to draw attention. She had been invited out of courtesy, not expectation, and she knew the unspoken rule well enough to follow it without being told. An Omega should be grateful for a seat at the back, for a view that did not demand participation. The air carried familiar scents of flowers and fresh bread, comforting and distant at the same time, and Elena focused on slow breaths, counting them the way she always did when she felt out of place. She told herself she was fine, that she had learned how to exist quietly, how to let moments pass without asking anything from them. The bride's laughter drifted across the hall, bright and effortless, and Elena smiled at the sound, a small, sincere smile meant for someone else's happiness. She remembered arriving earlier, slipping into her seat while conversations paused just long enough to acknowledge her presence before resuming without her, and she had not minded. Not really. She had expected it. What she had not expected was the weight of the evening settling on her shoulders, the gentle ache of watching a ceremony built on promises when she had been taught to expect none. She adjusted the simple fabric of her dress, neat and unremarkable, chosen precisely because it would not invite comment, and kept her gaze low as the officiant spoke. The hall felt vast then, measured in quiet distances rather than feet, and Elena felt like a single note held too long at the end of a song. Somewhere near the entrance, the doors opened with a restrained sound that shifted the air, subtle but undeniable, and conversations softened as if guided by instinct. Elena did not look up right away. She had learned that some presences belonged to other people's stories. Instead, she listened to the change in the room, to the way attention gathered without words, and wondered briefly how it must feel to walk into a place and be expected. She straightened her posture, smoothing her breath, ready to let the moment pass over her as so many others had, unaware that this evening, this wedding, and this quiet seat at the edge of the hall were about to become something entirely different. Elena kept her eyes lowered as the subtle shift in the room continued, the kind that did not announce itself, yet somehow demanded respect. Chairs stopped creaking, glasses paused midair, and even the soft music seemed to hesitate, as if listening. She felt it more than she saw it, a presence settling into the hall with calm certainty, not loud or aggressive, just undeniably there. The scent in the air changed, clean and sharp like rain after a long dry stretch, and it made her breath catch for reasons she could not immediately explain. Around her, people straightened their backs, smoothing jackets and dresses, instinctively aligning themselves with something older than manners. Elena remained still, hands folded, heart steady but alert, telling herself again that whatever had arrived did not concern her. She had spent years mastering the art of being unaffected, of letting important moments belong to others without resentment. Yet when the footsteps crossed the polished floor, measured and unhurried, she felt a pull she could not ignore, like a tide moving beneath calm water. She lifted her gaze just slightly, enough to see dark fabric pass between rows, enough to notice how space seemed to open ahead of him without request. Conversations did not stop because he demanded silence. They stopped because no one felt the need to speak. Elena swallowed, unsure why her chest felt suddenly tight, and lowered her eyes again, focusing on the grain of the wooden floor, on the steady rhythm of her breathing. She told herself it was coincidence, that she was simply tired, that weddings carried strange emotions for everyone. The ceremony continued, vows spoken clearly, Rings exchanged with careful smiles, applause rising and falling like a practiced wave. But Elena felt separate from it now, as though she were listening from another room. She became acutely aware of her surroundings, the faint warmth of the candle nearest her, the soft brush of fabric against her knees, the quiet space beside her chair that no one had claimed. It was then that she sensed it, not footsteps or sound, but attention, focused and unwavering. Her skin prickled, an instinct urged her to look up even as caution told her not to. Slowly, carefully, she raised her eyes. He was closer now, standing just a few feet away, not towering, not imposing by force, yet commanding in a way that made the air feel heavier. His expression was composed, eyes steady, holding a depth that suggested patience rather than judgment. He was not looking at the altar, nor at the newly married couple, nor at the rows of guests who had angled their bodies toward him without realizing it. He was looking at her. The realization sent a quiet shock through her, sharp and grounding all at once. Elena felt suddenly exposed, as though the careful invisibility she wore had slipped without warning. She did not look away. She could not. There was no hunger in his gaze, no curiosity that reduced her to a passing thought, only recognition, calm and deliberate, as if he had found exactly what he had been searching for and had known all along where to look. Her heartbeat quickened, not in fear, but in something closer to disbelief. No one of his stature noticed omegas like her. They did not pause for them. They certainly did not seek them out in crowded halls filled with more suitable choices. 1,000 questions pressed against her lips, but she said nothing, holding his gaze in the quiet that stretched between them. Around them, the ceremony moved toward its conclusion, applause rising again, guests beginning to turn towards celebration. But Elena felt suspended in a moment that did not belong to the room. She wondered, fleetingly, if she was mistaken, if his attention would drift away as easily as it had arrived, leaving her with nothing but embarrassment for imagining significance where there was none. Yet he did not move. And in that stillness, Elena felt the fragile structure of her expectations begin to shift, not breaking, not yet, but bending in a way that made her breath unsteady and her future suddenly uncertain. The moment stretched longer than Elena expected, long enough for her to become aware of how quiet the space around them had grown, not empty, but attentive. She could hear the soft rustle of guests shifting their weight, the faint clink of glass somewhere near the back of the hall, yet none of it broke the sense that something private had unfolded in plain sight. He remained where he was, close enough that she could see the fine details she had not noticed at first, the calm set of his shoulders, the deliberate stillness that suggested control rather than restraint. When he finally spoke to someone beside him, his voice was low and measured, not carrying across the room, and Elena did not catch the words, only the way the person nodded immediately, stepping aside without hesitation. It was then she understood what everyone else already seemed to know. This was no ordinary guest. A quiet murmur rippled outward, restrained but unmistakable, and Elena caught fragments as they reached her, respectful tones, titles spoken softly, the name Lycan King passing from one whisper to the next like a current. King Alaric Wolf. The name settled over her with unexpected weight. She had heard it before, of course, everyone had, spoken with a mix of awe and distance, as though he existed somewhere beyond the reach of daily life. She had never imagined standing this close to him, never imagined that his attention would find her of all people. Her first instinct was to look away, to give him the courtesy of distance, but something in his expression held her still, not commandingly, but with quiet assurance. He took a step closer, stopping at a respectful distance that acknowledged the boundary of her space. And for the first time since she arrived that evening, Elena felt seen without being judged. His gaze softened slightly, and though his posture remained composed, there was an ease to him now, as if he had already decided something and found peace in the choice. Around them, the celebration resumed in cautious increments, laughter returning in measured tones, music lifting again, yet no one interrupted, no one questioned his pause beside an omega seated at the edge of the hall. Elena felt a subtle shift within herself, a recognition that whatever rules had kept her invisible until now no longer applied in quite the same way. She searched his face for expectation, for demand, but found none. There was only patience, and something like invitation, offered without pressure. Her heart beat steadily, louder than before, but not painfully so, and she became aware of how deeply she was breathing, how grounded she felt despite the unfamiliar attention. When he spoke to her directly at last, it was not loud enough for others to hear, and not intimate in a way that felt intrusive. It was simply personal. He asked her name, and when she answered, Elena Carter, he repeated it once, as though committing it to memory, his tone even and thoughtful. No one had ever said her name like that, without haste, without dismissal. She found herself answering his next question honestly, telling him she was enjoying the evening, even if she had not expected to. A hint of understanding crossed his expression, subtle but genuine, and for a moment she wondered if he understood more than she had said aloud. The realization that the Lycan King was standing beside her, speaking to her as though her presence mattered, sent a quiet tremor through her sense of self. She was aware of the eyes on them, curious but restrained, yet she did not feel exposed. She felt anchored. As the music shifted into a livelier rhythm and guests began to rise from their seats, King Alaric remained where he was, his attention still on her, and Elena sensed that the evening had crossed a threshold she could not uncross. Whatever came next, she knew one thing with certainty. She would no longer be content to fade into the background, not after being seen this clearly, not after realizing that the world could change with nothing more than a pause and a choice. As the guests rose and the hall eased into motion, Elena felt the subtle pressure of attention settle around her like a changing current, not sharp, but persistent, as if the room itself were adjusting to a new center of gravity. Conversations resumed in careful tones, laughter measured, glances. Quick and curious, and through it all King Alaric remained beside her, unhurried, unbothered by the invisible rules that had kept everyone else in their lanes. Servers passed with trays, music found a brighter rhythm, and chairs slid back as couples gathered near the dance floor, yet no one crossed the quiet space he had claimed near her chair. Elena noticed it with a kind of wonder, the way people paused before approaching, the way eyes dipped in respect before moving on, and she understood that his presence did more than draw attention, it set boundaries. He spoke again, asking if she would like to move closer to the celebration, his tone offering a choice rather than instruction. The question startled her, not because it was bold, but because it acknowledged her agency in a place where she had long felt she had none. She considered the dance floor, the clustered tables, the hum of conversation that promised warmth but also scrutiny, and then she considered the empty chair beside her, the quiet she had learned to accept. She answered honestly, saying she was comfortable where she was for now. He nodded as if that answer mattered, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world, and took a seat nearby, angled toward her rather than the room. The simple act sent a ripple through the hall, subtle but unmistakable, and Elena felt a flicker of nerves before reminding herself that she had done nothing wrong. Whispers traveled again, softer this time, respectful, questioning, and she caught pieces without trying, surprised that the Lycan King would sit, curiosity about the Omega who had caught his attention, speculation tempered by caution. Elena kept her posture relaxed, her breathing even, refusing to shrink under the weight of attention she had not asked for. She found herself studying him in turn, the steady line of his jaw, the calm awareness in his eyes as he acknowledged greetings with brief nods, never taking his focus fully from her. There was no urgency in him, no need to perform, and that steadiness eased something tight in her chest. She realized she was no longer counting her breaths. Time moved differently now, measured not by avoidance, but by presence. Someone approached at last, a well-dressed couple offering congratulations and polite conversation, their words carefully chosen, their eyes flicking between Elena and the king. With restrained curiosity, Alaric responded with courteous brevity, introducing Elena by name without title, without explanation, as if her place there required none. The effect was immediate and quieting. The couple smiled, adjusted their tone, and included her naturally before moving on, leaving behind a space that felt warmer than before. Elena noticed the shift with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Inclusion, she realized, did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it came with a seat offered, a name spoken clearly, a presence that refused to let others look away. As the evening unfolded, more guests passed, some offering kind words, others simply nodding in acknowledgement, and Elena felt herself becoming part of the room rather than its edge. She did not pretend the attention was comfortable, but it was honest, and honesty felt like a relief. The music slowed again, a gentle melody filling the hall, and couples drifted closer together, laughter softening into murmured conversation. Elena glanced toward the floor, aware of a familiar ache stirring, the old instinct to step back before hope could take shape. Before she could retreat into herself, she sensed Alaric's attention sharpen, not urgent, but intentional. He did not speak yet. He did not reach out. He simply waited, allowing the moment to breathe, allowing her the space to decide who she would be in this unfolding scene. In that waiting, Elena felt something steady take root, a quiet courage she had not known she possessed, and she understood that whatever line the evening was moving toward, she would cross it standing upright, seen, and unafraid. The music eased into a slower cadence, a gentle rhythm that invited closeness without demanding it, and Elena felt the shift ripple through the hall like a held breath. Couples moved toward the floor in unspoken agreement, hands finding hands, shoulders relaxing, laughter softening into something more intimate and warm. She watched from her seat, aware of the familiar pull to fade back, to let the evening belong to those who fit naturally into scenes like this. Yet she did not move away. She stayed where she was, grounded by the quiet certainty of King Alaric's presence beside her. He had not asked her to stand, had not offered his hand, and the absence of pressure made the moment feel safer than any invitation could have. Instead, he turned slightly toward her, his attention narrowing until the noise of the room seemed to blur at the edges. He asked her simple questions, where she was from, whether she enjoyed gatherings like this, what she liked to do when the world felt too loud, and each question was asked without assumption, without expectation of a pleasing answer. Elena found herself responding more openly than she intended, surprised by the ease with which words came when she did not feel judged for them. She spoke of quiet mornings, of small routines that helped her feel steady, of learning to observe before acting, and he listened with the kind of focus that made her feel as though nothing else mattered in that moment. When she finished, he nodded thoughtfully, as if considering something important, and shared small pieces of himself in return, careful, measured, enough to feel like trust without revealing more than he was ready to give. Around them, people noticed the way they leaned slightly closer, the way the space between them felt intentional rather than accidental, and speculation stirred again, but it carried a different tone now, less curious and more cautious, as if everyone sensed they were witnessing something that did not belong to them. Elena became aware of how her shoulders had relaxed, how the tightness she had carried into the hall had softened into something like calm. She realized she was no longer bracing herself for dismissal, no longer waiting for the moment when attention would drift away and leave her exposed. Alaric remained steady, present, unhurried, and the constancy of it allowed her to remain as well. A song ended and another began, the melody familiar and comforting, and Elena felt a quiet ache rise in her chest, not sharp, but persistent, the ache of wanting something she had taught herself not to reach for. She glanced toward the dance floor and then away, a habit she had practiced for years, but this time Alaric noticed the movement. He did not comment immediately. He waited, allowing the moment to unfold naturally, then asked, gently, if she enjoyed watching people dance. She smiled, admitting that she did, that she liked the way music gave people permission to be softer with one another. Something in his expression shifted at that, a warmth that had not been there before, and he told her she had a thoughtful way of seeing the world. The words settled over her with surprising weight, not because they were grand, but because they were sincere. Compliments had always felt fragile to Elena, easily broken by the expectation that followed them, but this one arrived without demand, and she let it rest where it landed. As the evening deepened, the hall grew warmer, lights dimmed slightly, and conversations blended into a low, comfortable hum. Elena noticed how naturally people now included her when they passed, how greetings were offered without hesitation, how the empty space beside her no longer felt empty at all. She understood that the change was not magic, but choice, Alaric's choice to remain, to be seen with her, to let others adjust accordingly. The realization was both humbling and unsettling. She did not know what it meant yet, only that it mattered. When the music paused briefly, a hush settling before the next song, Elena felt the moment sharpen, a sense of anticipation threading through the room. She met Alaric's gaze again, searching his face for clarity, for reassurance, for warning, and found something steadier instead, an unspoken question waiting between them. The answer had not been spoken yet, but Elena sensed it drawing closer, carried on the quiet certainty that whatever came next would not leave her sitting alone. The pause before the next song felt deliberate, as if the room itself were waiting for a decision to be made. Elena noticed the way conversations dipped, how bodies shifted subtly toward the center of the hall, anticipation threading through the air in quiet strands. She felt it too, a gentle pressure building beneath her calm, not fear, but awareness. King Alaric turned toward her fully now, his posture still relaxed, but his attention unmistakably focused. He did not rush to fill the silence. Instead, he allowed it to settle, trusting it to carry meaning on its own. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady, meant only for her, and he acknowledged the moment without dramatizing it. He said the night had been beautiful, that weddings often revealed more than they intended to, and she understood that he was not speaking only of the ceremony. Elena nodded, feeling the truth of it resonate in her chest. She admitted that she had expected to leave early, quietly, the way she usually did, but that the evening had surprised her. He regarded her thoughtfully at that, as if weighing something, then asked if she felt ready to leave the edge of the room behind. The question was gentle, not pressing, but it landed with weight. Elena considered it carefully. She thought of the countless times she had slipped away before being noticed, of the safety she had found in being unseen, and of how different this night felt, how steady she felt sitting beside him. She did not answer immediately. She looked at the dance floor, where couples moved with easy familiarity, then back at him, meeting his gaze without flinching. She said she was not sure she knew how to belong in spaces like this, not without pretending. His expression softened, and he replied that belonging did not require performance, only presence, and that she had already proven she was capable of that. The words eased something tight within her, not because they promised acceptance, but because they respected her honesty. Around them, the music resumed, a slower melody that wrapped the hall in warmth, and Elena became aware of how close he was sitting, not intrusively, but near enough to be felt. She sensed the attention of others sharpening again, curiosity rising like a tide, but this time she did not shrink from it. She realized that if she stood now, if she stepped forward, it would be because she chose to, not because she was invited out of obligation. Alaric shifted then, standing smoothly, unhurried, and for a brief moment the hall seemed to still around him. He did not extend his hand immediately. He waited, giving her time, space, choice. Elena's heart beat steadily as she looked up at him, the height difference reminding her of the distance between their worlds, yet his expression bridged it effortlessly. She rose from her seat, feeling the subtle change ripple outward, the way eyes followed her movement with renewed interest. Standing beside him, she felt taller somehow, more grounded, as if the floor beneath her feet had become more solid. He asked if she would like to walk with him, not to the center of attention, but simply forward, and she agreed, surprised by the certainty in her voice. They moved together slowly, not yet joining the dancers, but no longer hidden at the edge. The path they took was unspoken, yet clear, and people stepped aside naturally, creating space without resistance. Elena felt the weight of the moment settle over her, the awareness that she was crossing a line she could not retreat from, and instead of fear, she felt resolve. She realized that whatever this connection was, it was being shaped by patience, by respect, by the quiet understanding that neither of them needed to rush. As they paused near the edge of the dance floor, the music swelling around them, Elena sensed the room holding its breath once more, waiting not for spectacle, but for meaning. She looked at Alaric, searching his face for the next step, and found in his steady gaze a reassurance that surprised her. Whatever he was about to offer, whatever words he chose to speak, she knew they would not demand more than she was willing to give. In that knowledge, Elena felt a calm confidence settle within her, a readiness to be present, fully and without apology, for whatever came next. The music swelled gently around them, a steady rhythm that seemed to slow time rather than hurry it along. And Elena felt the awareness of the room sharpen to a single point. People watched without staring, sensed without intruding, as if everyone understood that whatever unfolded next would not be loud, but it would matter. King Alaric turned toward her, his movement unhurried, his attention complete, and for a moment the world narrowed to the quiet space between them. He did not reach for her hand. He did not pull her forward. He simply looked at her, truly looked at her, with a steadiness that made her feel anchored rather than exposed. Elena met his gaze, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones, and realized she was no longer afraid of being seen. The edges of the hall blurred, laughter and music fading into a distant hum, and she became aware of her own breathing, calm and even, her heart steady in her chest. Alaric spoke then, his voice low enough that it did not carry beyond them, yet clear enough that its meaning resonated through the stillness. He acknowledged the way she had stood alone earlier, not with pity, but with respect, and said that strength often revealed itself quietly, in moments most people overlooked. The words surprised her, not because they were kind, but because they were precise, as though he had observed her without assumption. Elena felt something shift within her, a recognition that this was not coincidence, not curiosity, but intention. She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped, sensing that he was not finished. He paused, allowing the silence to breathe, allowing her the space to remain exactly where she was. And then he spoke the words that would echo through the room long after the music ended. "Stay with me." The phrase was simple, unadorned, offered rather than commanded, yet it carried a gravity that settled over the hall like a held breath. It was not a public declaration, not a claim made for spectacle, but an invitation grounded in choice. Elena felt the impact immediately, a warmth spreading through her chest, steady and undeniable. She understood what he was offering and what he was not. He was not asking her to change, to perform, to become something she was not. He was asking her to remain, to occupy space beside him as she was. Around them, the room seemed to pause, conversations dipping, movement slowing, as if everyone sensed that something irreversible had just occurred. Elena did not answer right away. She searched his face for expectation, for pressure, for anything that would make the decision feel heavy, and found none. There was only patience, quiet confidence, and a willingness to accept whatever choice she made. In that moment, Elena realized how rare it was to be given true agency, to be invited without obligation. She thought of the empty chair at the edge of the hall, of the years she had spent believing that invisibility was safety, and of how different she felt now, standing upright in the center of attention without losing herself. She nodded once, the movement small but certain, and said yes, her voice steady, unafraid. The effect was immediate and profound. Alaric did not smile broadly or gesture outward. He simply inclined his head, acknowledgement passing between them like a quiet promise kept. The room exhaled, conversation resuming with a different tone, respectful, subdued, as if everyone understood that a line had been crossed with grace rather than force. Elena felt a subtle shift in the way people looked at her, not with curiosity, but with recognition, and she realized that her place in the room had changed, not because of who stood beside her, but because she had chosen to stand. As the music carried on, Elena remained where she was, beside Alaric, aware that the evening had reshaped itself around a single moment of honesty. She did not know what the future held, did not need to. For now, it was enough to stay, to be present, to let the quiet strength of her choice settle into something real. And as the lights glowed softly around them and the night moved forward, Elena knew she would never again mistake being alone for being unworthy. After her answer settled between them, the hall did not erupt into reaction, did not rush to frame the moment with spectacle, and that restraint made the change feel deeper, more permanent. Conversation resumed in softer tones, as if everyone instinctively understood that something had shifted and did not need to be announced. Elena felt it in the way people moved now, in the respectful distance they gave, in the subtle recalibration of attention that no longer treated her as an afterthought. King Alaric remained beside her, not claiming space loudly, but anchoring it with presence, and she realized how rare it was to feel protected without being overshadowed. The music continued, flowing around them, and couples returned to their conversations, yet the awareness lingered, a shared understanding that the night had quietly rewritten itself. Elena noticed small details she had never been allowed the luxury of noticing before: the warmth of the lights reflecting off polished wood, the gentle sway of fabric as people passed, the way her own breathing felt unhurried and free. Someone nearby offered her a drink, addressing her directly, waiting patiently for her response, and she accepted with a polite nod, aware that the simple exchange marked a change she would not have been granted earlier in the evening. Alaric acknowledged others as they approached, his manner unchanged, calm and measured, but his proximity to her made it clear that she was not temporary, not incidental. Elena felt a steady confidence take root, not born of status, but of choice, hers and his, intersecting without conflict. She listened as he spoke briefly with a group of elders, his tone respectful but firm, and noted how their eyes returned to her afterward, assessing not her worth, but her place. There was no challenge in their gaze, only acknowledgement, and she understood then that recognition did not always arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrived with silence that refused to question what had been decided. As the night deepened, the hall grew more relaxed, laughter finding its way back into corners that had been cautious before, and Elena found herself participating without effort, responding naturally when spoken to, offering quiet smiles, allowing herself to be present rather than braced. She became aware of how often she had underestimated her own capacity to belong, how much energy she had spent preparing for rejection that never came when she stood honestly in her own space. Alaric turned to her again, asking if she was comfortable, not as a formality, but with genuine attention, and she answered truthfully that she was, more than she had expected. He nodded, seeming satisfied, and the simplicity of the exchange grounded her further. She realized that this was what partnership could feel like at its beginning, not grand declarations or overwhelming promises, but mutual awareness, respect offered and returned. The room seemed to accept this truth alongside them, the social current adjusting smoothly, as though it had been waiting for permission to settle into a more honest shape. Elena noticed the bride and groom pass nearby, smiling warmly, offering congratulations that included her without hesitation, and she returned the sentiment with genuine happiness, surprised by how light her chest felt. She had not lost herself in this moment. She had found a steadier version of herself within it. As the evening approached its natural close, some guests began to depart, others lingered in comfortable clusters, and Elena remained where she was, no longer counting minutes until escape. She understood that whatever tomorrow brought, this night would remain with her, not as a fairy tale, but as proof. Proof that silence could carry power, that gentleness could redirect the course of a room, that being chosen did not require becoming someone else. When she glanced at Alaric once more, she saw in his expression a quiet certainty that matched her own, an understanding that what had unfolded did not need to be rushed or explained. It simply needed to be honored. And as the lights dimmed slightly and the music softened into its final notes, Elena felt something settle into place, a sense of rightness that did not demand the future, only respected the present, where she stood seen, steady, and no longer alone. The evening moved gently toward its close, not with urgency, but with a quiet sense of completion, as if the hall itself understood that its work had been done. Guests gathered coats and exchanged soft farewells, their voices low, respectful, carrying an ease that had not been there at the beginning of the night. Elena watched them with a calm attentiveness she barely recognized in herself, aware of how different she felt standing here now, no longer measuring her presence against the edges of the room. King Alaric remained beside her, his presence steady, neither demanding nor distant, and she realized that the strength of the moment lay not in what had been promised, but in what had been allowed to exist naturally. As the final notes of music faded, replaced by the gentle hum of conversation and the muted sounds of departure, Elena felt a sense of clarity settle within her. She understood that she would leave this place changed, not marked by spectacle, but by certainty. Alaric spoke to her again, suggesting they step outside for a moment, not as an escape, but as a continuation, and she agreed without hesitation. They moved through the hall together, the path opening as easily as it had before, and the cool night air greeted them with quiet relief. The sky stretched wide above, stars visible between slow drifting clouds, and the distant sounds of celebration softened behind them. Elena took a steady breath, feeling grounded, present, aware of her own heartbeat without anxiety. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she was not bracing for what came next. She was simply allowing it. Alaric stood beside her, looking out into the night rather than at her, giving her space even now, and spoke of the future with careful honesty, not laying out plans, but acknowledging possibility. He said that paths did not always reveal themselves all at once, that some were meant to be walked step by step, chosen each time rather than assumed. Elena listened, appreciating the absence of expectation, and responded with her own truth, that she did not need certainty tonight, only respect and time. He accepted that without hesitation, and in that acceptance, she felt something settle into place, a mutual understanding that did not require urgency to be real. They stood there for a while, comfortable in the shared silence, the night holding them gently, and Elena thought of the person she had been when she arrived, seated, alone, prepared to leave without being missed. That version of herself felt distant now, not erased, but honored for having carried her to this point. She knew that challenges would come, that the world beyond this hall would not always be as kind or as understanding, but she also knew that she would meet it differently. She had learned, in the quietest way possible, that being chosen did not begin with someone else's decision. It began with her willingness to stay. As they turned back toward the entrance, ready to rejoin the last of the departing guests, Elena felt no rush, no fear of stepping forward. The night had given her something she would carry long after the lights dimmed and the hall emptied, a sense of worth that did not depend on approval or rank. She glanced once more at Alaric, not seeking reassurance, but acknowledging partnership, and saw reflected there the same calm confidence she now felt within herself. Together, they walked back inside, not to claim attention, but to move onward, steady and unhurried. And as the doors closed behind them and the wedding became a memory rather than a moment, Elena knew with quiet certainty that her story had shifted, not because she had been rescued or elevated, but because she had been seen, had chosen to remain, and had discovered that her presence, once claimed only by herself, was enough to change the course of her world.